Hello and welcome to the Magic of podcast with Paul Rothman. Today's very special guest is a good friend of mine in the magic world. I've known Joshua J. Let's not mess about here, but I've known Joshua I was just working it out actually, pretty much since I've been in magic. So it's got to be about 14, 15 years now. And Josh is a fabulous magician, which goes without saying. He's also a creator of magic. He is a lecturer. He is created his own business in magic. He's a great thinker about magic and beyond. So we'll dig into this. Anyway, here he is, Joshua J. Hey, Josh.
Hey, Paul. Thanks so much. Yeah, we have known each other a long time. And what's weird is I see you sometimes in short spans of time in LA and England and elsewhere, and it seems like our paths are always crossing. So it's always a pleasure to chat with you, and I love the way you think about magic. So yeah, I'm excited for whatever this turns into today.
Excellent. Yeah, I think I became a bit of a Joshua J. groupie virtually, because I was popping up at your lectures and you'd see me and go, what are you doing here? You've seen all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah. But that's actually intrinsic to what I find interesting about you. I watched a lecture that you did the other day, which was to Harvard.
Yeah.
And you are a thinker about magic. And what was really striking about this lecture at Harvard as well is you were describing how magicians think and how that's relative to what they were looking for. It was an interesting way of adapting to corporate, to companies, and to working with different people. And I thought that was really interesting because even though it was about magic, it kind of wasn't just about magic.
Yeah, I mean, so much to unpack there. Thank you. Yes. So, I mean, to start with, I am always so completely puzzled when people come see my shows, or in your case, lectures, multiple times, because I take that as the highest compliment. So I am truly, genuinely touched when someone does that. But I think that when I go to things multiple times, that's when it really gets interesting. So if I see a lecture I really like, I try to see it more than once. And I don't mean rewatch a tape of the same lecture. I mean go see this person another time, because I want to know, was the crowd just giving off great energy and they were better one night than another? I want to see how they handle different situations. And I want to see how they think, what the larger thing is. I mean, we both know that when you go to a lecture, if you've been in magic for any length of time, the chances that you're going to be performing all or most of the tricks from any one performer are slim. If you go see a show, the chances that you're going to be so inspired you're going to try and emulate that person are slim, and you shouldn't. But if you're trying to get the gestalt, if you're trying to get the vibe of that person, it's really important to try to see them a lot. So thank you for that. You talk about how magicians think. Not to give a plug right off the bat, but this interests me completely. The idea of taking the lessons and the skill sets that we develop in magic and sharing them with people. So my whole overarching goal, whether you see my show 6 Impossible Things, the immersive show in New York, whether you see a lecture, whether you read my writing, whether you see me do a show, all of these things, I have the same core goal, which is improve people's appreciation for magic. I want to increase their magical fluency. You know, their ability to look at magic and just not be as it's always been, which is, oh, he's magic, he's great, he pulled a dollar bill out of a lemon. But instead to be able to go, this person is a really clever magician and its sort of self-expression is magic. This is a hilarious comedian who uses magic in their work, and this guy's a hack. To be able to tell the difference, people need more magical fluency. And everything I do is sort of driven by giving people that fluency, that lexicon, that they improve the appreciation for what we do. And so that talk at Harvard, How Magicians Think, has been turned into a book which will come out next fall called How Magicians Think. And it answers all the questions you and I and everybody else gets asked when we do shows. Hey, is Houdini as good as people say he was? How do you come up with these tricks? Do you ever messed up a trick on stage? Every one of these questions, 52 questions, gets a 25-page treatment in essay form.
That's interesting. There was something that you brought up in that as well, which was about the things that lay people react to, and the answer was surprise.
Yes.
And, the various things that people, you think that they want from magic or that they're most excited about. And that is interesting. But there's something really integral, flipping back to what you're saying about how you construct things. Because my observation, actually, I was thinking about the effects that you've released, and there's some seriously hot magic tricks that you have released. But what's interesting about them is, however technical they may be, that's not the thing that I think about when I think about them. I think about the narrative that you've constructed with them. And there's one in particular, which I don't know if I should say the name, because this is more of a broader.
These are commercial.
Yeah, so Hitchcock.
Yeah, Hitchcock, sure.
Which I started to do, and I've loved Hitchcock for ages, but not found my own narrative on it. Now yours is so steeped in its story, and there's a couple of things related to Hitchcock that I think are interesting. First of all, you take the movie theme and the MacGuffin and all these ideas that are in it, which are brilliant, which actually, when you listen to the trick, that's what you remember. You don't remember the technical of the trick. Although I have done the trick and people talk about the four corners, the ripped cards, it's the trick I get the most messages about. But I found my own narrative for it. And so therein lies your love of allied arts and how important they are to your magic. And just that, and then there was a version that you did, I think it might have been on a Good Morning America or something like that.
Yeah.
Where you did it. And there's a wonderful moment, and I talk about this when I'm talking to other magicians about like great performance and those things where, where you brought it up about, do you fail? Are there difficult audiences? Are there problems? What happens when? And there's a beautiful moment where you're dealing with the presenters and you deal with her. She wants to be awkward and you just went, no, do what I say.
Yeah, I know. I'm always on the damn show, the same show always.
But it's a beautiful moment, actually, from my perspective.
Yeah, so lots to unpack here, and I don't want to lose, because I think it'd be interesting to your listeners, I don't want to lose this talk on surprise, because we sort of glossed over this. We'll come back to surprise. But yeah, let's talk about Hitchcock, because I appreciate the things you said. Here's the harmful thing that I hope listeners won't fall prey to, and it's easy to fall prey to. I don't know outside of magic what the dictum is, but inside magic, we're always told plots have to be simple. You ought to be able to describe it in one sentence. Vernon often said this. A plot should be able to be said in one sentence. 4 coins go through a table. A card comes to the top of the deck. But that's a very limiting way of looking at material, at repertoire. Some of the most wonderful effects cannot possibly be described in one sentence clearly. Some of my favorite effects, Tommy Wonder's ring watch wallet cannot be reduced to a simple, well, there's this robbing premise, and so the watch is removed and the ring and some money from a wallet, and the items are placed into an envelope, but the wallet's in full view, and then the items vanish, but then they go back. It's a wonderful trick. Visually, it's so clear and perfect and takes 2 minutes, but it would take you 2 minutes just to tell what happened. But that doesn't mean it's bad. Well, this led me to a really great realization that maybe your listeners will find helpful, which is this. A presentation has to add clarity to an effect and not take away from it. And in the case of Hitchcock, it's a good example, I believe, of where the premise, my sharing things about Hitchcock and what happens, actually makes the plot easier to follow. If you did Hitchcock and didn't talk about what I talk about and didn't replace it like you have with something that speaks to your humanity or your interests, if you just say, okay, so all four of you have picked a card, now put them back in the deck, and now four corners are missing, but that card I tore up at the beginning, those corners now match the card. The effect is totally confusing. It's a mess. But you put the presentation on it, and it's smooth, and each phase is logical, and each phase explains and makes clear the next one so that the whole thing comes together. So that's a lesson in and of itself, but here's the real lesson of all of that. Most magicians overpresent their material. Most presentations weaken magic. It's a sad but true fact. I mean, we all know that it's, the magician who narrates his tricks, and then it comes to the top, and then it goes in the middle, and now it's on top again. We think of that as artless. But what's worse, that or... And just like believing in yourself can make you rise to the top of the corporate field, that card, I mean, that's terrible, right? That's artless and schmaltzy and terrible. So there's an example where me putting something on top of a trick isn't helping the clarity of the effect. So when I'm working with magicians, I'm always pushing for them to really ask themselves, is your presentation truly adding to the clarity of the effect and the enjoyment of the effect, or is it getting in the way? Because there is nothing wrong with presenting things minimally or without some deeper meaning. I think that magicians get that so wrong. They think every trick has to have meaning, and they end up with a bogged down, pretentious show. But if instead you pepper it in the places where it really helps. I mean, take out of sight. This is another trick I do. And this is the one, for those who don't know, I went on Penn and Teller and I did this trick and I fooled them, which was a great honor. But this is a trick about me telling the true story of living in a neighborhood in New York City around blind people. And when you say the opening inline to that effect, which is essentially I say, can you show a trick to this guy? And the person said, well, wait a second, he's blind. You physically, when I do this trick every time, it's my favorite moment to deliver because people do this. They physically lean in. It's the greatest compliment in the world whenever you're having a conversation, when you're so interesting about something, that somebody leans in to hear you better, to get closer to your face. And people, hundreds of people, when I perform it in the theater, they lean in because they want to know, what does it look like to perform magic for a blind person? That's an example where the premise is helping the trick. But I'll often, when I do oil and water, let me tell you something. I take out 4 red cards and 4 black cards, and I just do the trick because I don't think oil and water needs a presentation around it.
But if you're building something within a show, I think one would think about the narrative, and the narrative isn't necessarily about the blind man or about the movie. The narrative can be as simple as the construct of 4 aces. It can be as simple as that. There is narrative in that, but it's pared down. It's
literal.
Yeah.
The narrative is the plot of the trick. I mean, I don't think magic needs to have meaning. I think magic needs to be fascinating. That's all it needs. It just has to be fascinating. If it's fascinating, it has enough. If it has meaning, great. But I don't think that needs to be forced in.
But you need the audience, I think, need to feel the authenticity of the performer. Now, whether that's character or heightened version of yourself, I mean, you can come in and do magic tricks and the audience will go, wow, lovely. I remember there was an explosion of magic tricks and it was wonderful. But I think at its best, it's about character, and be that your integral character or the character that you're building. I think it's much harder to create a character and make that authentic to the magic you're doing, because you have to find the authenticity in the creation of the character as well. But
I think you're right. I think authenticity is more important than character, because I think character is a byproduct of authenticity, so to speak. And I think that if we are authentic, and it sounds like, okay, there's Josh, he's in his parents' home in this case, but he's sitting there and he's speaking like a normal person. He's not reading something. He's not rehearsed. He's talking with his friend. That's authentic. And from there, I don't know how much more you need character. You just have to be authentic to whoever you're being on stage.
But that's an interesting thing. I had this conversation with Mark Bowden, who's a behavioral expert and body language. And we were talking about authenticity, and he said, well, there's a difficulty with the idea of authenticity, and that is that when I speak to you, I'm being authentic. I'm my authentic self talking to Josh. When I speak to my mum, I'm also authentic, but I'm the authentic me speaking to my mum. And those two conversations would not necessarily be the same, or I would respond in the same way. And yet, in both examples, I'm being authentic.
Yeah. I mean, this goes as deep as we want to get. I mean, we are all playing roles for the people around us. I think that what's relevant to performing is we have to be the exaggerated versions of the selves that we want to play. I mean, it's a lot of the parts of my personality are sort of irrelevant to a magic watching audience, but hopefully the compassionate side, the fascinating side, that comes through.
There's a couple of things. One, we want to come back to this idea of surprise.
Yes.
Let's deal with that, actually, and I'll come back to my other thought.
So the one thing I will say is, for all of your listeners, I hope that you can read the article that I wrote on this in 2013. It's been shared and it's been cited in a lot of studies since. It's free to all the world. You can go to Vanishing Ink and get it. It's called What Do Audiences Really Think? And I originally published it in Magic Magazine. And I worked with the College of New Jersey on this study. And we asked all the questions that magicians have acted like they've known for 100 years, but I don't really think they knew. Questions like, surface level stuff. What's the most commonly thought of card? Or what do lay people like best about magic? And do people like to help? And how should you get volunteers? All the way to really deep level stuff, like what are the most important emotions people feel during a magic show? Do they want to know how it's done? And we can speak to all this stuff as much as you like. I find it endlessly fascinating. But the part that you picked out is that we asked point blank 1,000 participants what they like most about magicians and watching magic shows. And I expected them to say the mystery of it all, getting fooled, being astonished, that feeling before I wanted to know how it's done when it takes your breath away. And it was none of those things. An overwhelmingly large portion of the people surveyed said that their favorite part about magic was surprise. They like to be surprised. That's the thing they associate with magic. And surprise plays into a lot of great magic tricks, but I don't think any magicians were giving it the priority that it perhaps deserves. But when you think about surprise as being the thing, the fix that most people want, you can rethink your entire show, your entire outlook of magic, to try and say, where are the really surprising moments in my show? We know where the amazing moments are. They're here, 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 and here. These are the tricks I do. But where are the true surprises? You lift up that cup and there's fruit. You slice open the lemon and there's the dollar bill. Where are the surprises in the show, and are there enough?
So that ties into the idea as well of getting too caught up in your narrative or in your the trick that works. So it's this old idea that in your 20s you do a trick and it's great and the patter fits, it fits you, but you're still doing that trick at 25, at 30, at 35, whatever it is. And those things need to adapt and be reconstructed and rethought and reimagined. And you see it with magicians a lot where, they're doing something that obviously worked at one time, but suddenly he's dated. The language is dated. The trick is dated. And it's not necessarily the actual effect that's dated. It just needs reimagining.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that recently in a really, really popular, beloved parlor magician. I saw his act, an act that I have watched since I was a kid, and it's a marvelous act. But guess what? It's the exact opposite of how it used to be. It used to be so fresh and almost like cool and ahead of the curve and too hip for the room. And now it feels like, I'm not sure if he knows that that's like funny in a cringy way now, you know? Yeah, you're totally right. I mean, here's some other things from the survey just to help your listeners. We showed a clip of a magician to Group A and Group B. And for your information, it was the same person, always changing the people. But Clip A and Clip B are the same magician doing the same trick. But in Group A, we gave an introduction. And in Group B, we just said, please watch the following magician. So Group A, we tried very different introductions. One was based on peer review. Please watch world-famous magician Sean Farquhar perform a trick that fooled Penn and Teller and his peers to win the World Championship of Magic. Well, here's a guy who's good for magicians. We did another one where we said, please watch leading corporate entertainer so-and-so, one of the most expensive magicians in the United States. Okay, so this guy's expensive. Then we did fame. Please watch world-famous performer David Blaine perform a feat that he did on his 8th television special. Here's a guy who's famous. Wasn't much difference between the kinds of introductions that tested well, but people enjoyed the same clip if they were predisposed to an introduction to the tune of about 50% more. They had a deeper appreciation. Here's the crazy one. They guessed less accurately for how it's done. So, I mean, if you want to go deep, we can talk about why that could possibly be. But every aspect of the performance of the same clip was stronger when they had an introduction. So for magicians, and I run 2 conventions with Andy Gladwin, and so much of the time, great magicians, I say, okay, how do you want to be introduced? Oh, it doesn't matter, just bring me out there. No big deal. Pretty big deal.
Yeah. I think that's... well, let's go deeper into that. Why is that? Why does the introduction, what does that do?
Yeah, I mean, and I want to be clear, any discussion we have as to the reasons why, we leave the survey behind and the scientists who worked on it. I mean, they don't even attempt to try to get into the minds of people unless they can back it up with data. So the data is what I explained to you, and you can read about that. The reasons behind it now are just Josh and Paul talking about it. I can't say for certain. When we would show clips in various parts, there are many other parts of the survey, and the most valuable one I don't want to forget, so let's make sure to loop back around to this. But my best guess, and I'm not at all sure about this, is that, you know, we always talk about the willing suspension of disbelief in magic. You know, it's like, well, I think it's actually an unwilling suspension of disbelief most of the time. I mean, a willing suspension of disbelief is we're watching Peter Pan and we see these thick wires on the actor, but we ignore them because we want to see Peter Pan fly. That's a willing. I am willing to erase those wires in my mind's eye to enjoy this fiction. An unwilling suspension of disbelief is an empty cup that's placed on the table and lifted up. I am not trying to help you along in this. I know that there's not supposed to be anything under that cup, and when there is, unwillingly, I am now forced to see the impossible. Teller calls magic the difference between what you see and what you know. So I think that what's going on here in this study is that there is a submission by the viewer when they think they're in great hands. It's a little bit like, so to finish my thought, I think that they give up trying to figure out if they feel like they're in the hands of a real expert. Whereas if they're just told, please watch the magician do this trick, you'll be asked questions afterward. They're going to watch it like this, watching his hands, not being misdirected by what he's saying, watching very carefully. Whereas if they are seeing something that's that they can't understand by a so-called expert, then they're really looking forward to just being entertained. And similarly, I think that when you're in the hands of a great comedian, you laugh easier. I'm not convinced Dave Chappelle is genuinely the funniest comedian on the scene right now, but he's so respected, and he's had a history of being so funny that truly I laugh a little easier when he's on my screen, because I feel like I'm in the hands of an expert. If he's saying it, it's got to be funny.
But it's also about where you are and the expectation or not of an audience. So as a magician, we are super fortunate. We go to the Magic Castle. We get to perform there. It's one of the most amazing venues to perform in the world. And your audience have come to see magic. They've come with the knowledge that they're going to see, and it's not always the case, but they still come with the knowledge that they're going to see an expert.
Right.
And so they're open generally to that joy and that expectation. And I think there's a lot of leeway that goes with an audience there specifically. Whereas if you contrast that to, say, a British corporate audience at a drinks reception, where you are the adjunct to their evening, you are not the evening.
You are so right. Context and audience plays an enormous role. The art critic Gombrich, E.R.E.D. Gombrich, said, talked about the beholder's share. When you look at a piece of art, the artist did the art, but half of this equation is the beholder's share. What are you bringing to this Picasso piece that you're looking at? What are you bringing? Are you seeing it in a museum? Are you seeing it in somebody's really ritzy home? Or are you seeing it as a piece of street art on the street between bagels and the gym? So context is everything. And, people always ask, I don't want to say it's an amateur question, but people always say, what's your favorite trick to perform? Well, it's kind of the wrong question. The right question is like, there's always a best trick for a particular situation, and magic is all about finding the right trick for the right time for the right person. Yeah.
I like finding out that idea. Also, you touched on it earlier, but this how things should be. So you're told that you were talking about narrative and storytelling, and the expectation that a lot of people have a very strong opinion and tell you how it is. And we were talking before about ideas where you haven't had a moment to analyze and to come to an opinion about something. And sometimes those things take time. They develop over time. You have to make the mistakes and hit the wall. And you've talked about this before with your show in New York.
Yeah.
Where you have had tricks that you have invested and worked on and thrown away.
Oh, that's an understatement. Yeah, I think you were at the Magic Castle workshop. I did a 2-day, 8-hour-a-day workshop. I'm so glad you were there for it. Truly, one of the most pleasurable things I've ever done in magic, because for whatever reason, I feel like people have pigeonholed me into being a strong lecturer for a convention or a club, but I don't get many invites to do these, and in fairness, there's not a ton of them around, but I don't get a lot of invites to do these intensive seminars, multi-day, one person. I think people think of guys like Danny DeOrtiz and Juan Tamariz and guys like that as you want to spend a week with, and I get that, and they're fabulous, and we all should go to those. But I loved the opportunity to spend 16 hours, and I spent a ton of time building the curriculum. I mean, it was such a massive investment of time to try to give you guys truly 16 hours, and I brought in guests, and I did interviews and panels, and it really, for me at least, it was a very special time, and I hope people enjoyed it. But I read an essay there that I've never read aloud any other time, and I wrote it for myself. I didn't write it to read there. And it was called Giving Up the Ghosts. And, we don't even have enough time left in this podcast to tell you the full story. But here's the 3-minute version. I wanted to start my show with something truly transformative and different. I wanted people to understand immediately when they came to my show, which was kind of an experiential, interactive show, just 20 people in a New York basement walking through different environments to watch tricks. I wanted them to know instantly this was going to be a very different kind of magic show. And it's all close up. So I came up with this routine called Ghosts, where everybody is given sheets to put over their head with the little eye holes, so you're essentially made anonymous. And now you're in a room with 20 people, but you don't even know who you came with. You're shuffled up and you're walking around in a ghost sheet. And now a screen with me comes on, and you're told to stand on certain names on the ground, and we eliminate according to the audience's whim. And every time you eliminate more people come up, goes till we get down to the perfect spectator to start the show. And the last person, when we get down to that spectator, I whip off the sheet, and it's me. So it's a way to do an appearance that isn't some hokey appearance in some kind of weird illusion base. I'm right there among them. Here I am. I've appeared. They've chosen me and whittled it down to me. Let me tell you. I mean, this routine wasn't a disaster. A disaster is easy. You do it 3 times. You go, this isn't playing. This is a joke. We surveyed people, and it was about a third of people's favorite thing in the whole show. Maybe that plays into the surprise because nobody sees it coming. And a little more than a third absolutely hated it. Women hated getting their makeup messed up and their hair messed up. Older people didn't like putting it on, and people didn't like that they couldn't see easily through it, and they thought it was weird. And it was hard to know when to quit an idea because we had put so much time. First we tried ghosts, then we tried masks, then we tried only certain people participate, then we tried we shortened the routine so they're not in it for very long. We tried everything. Ultimately, I cut it out of the show. And there were a lot of, in my team, I told you so's that was no good. And those people, they just missed the boat. Because you can't have the really, I think, innovative, cool things. Like I have a piece with a T-shirt that came out of that show. And I have a piece that's done in total darkness that I'm enormously proud of that came out of that show, and a close-up act that came out of that show. You can't have those pieces if you don't have at least as many things that were equally ambitious but just incomplete, somehow unsatisfying. So yeah, I read this very vulnerable piece, which I think is sort of funny because, oh man, we had everything that can go wrong happen with those, things. We had people feeling each other up under the sheets. We had one drunk guy pick up his buddy and use it like a phallus, walking around with this sheet-covered guy, pushing it on people. We had people turn it into a turban on their head and making inflammatory remarks about Arabs. It every possible thing that could have gone wrong. The New York Times talked about it as being, insensitive because of white power. Everything that you could imagine to happen happened with ghosts. But, I have no shame about it. I have only pride because it's a useful failure.
But you see, there it is. There's the rub, as we say. There is no failure. The only failure is not getting up off the couch, generally. Right. Because, like you said, without those things happening, it wouldn't allow all the other things to happen. And so there is no development without those struggles, without those walls.
Exactly. And, again, maybe I'm giving myself too much of a pass, but I don't feel too bad about ghosts because I don't know too many of my colleagues who would have been willing to take that big of a risk. And yeah, I fell on my face with that one a little bit. But like I said, other ones, I got to add some really cool pieces to the repertoire. And it takes a lot of guts to try something that radical. Most 90% of professional magicians open their show with Kevin James' Bolorama. The same 10 routines. I'm trying to do something. I was trying to do something really different, and it didn't work. And I hope that listeners will take away from this that taking risks can come with some pride and some feeling of satisfaction, even if ultimately it doesn't end the way you hope it does.
So there's a huge connection here, which keeps coming up. The allied arts, the things that are inspire you. You talked about Gombrich. You talk about writing essays. You talk about film. You talked about Ghost. This conceit that is not a natural buy it from a magic shop idea.
Yeah.
Now, you started in magic very young, and you're from Ohio, Canton, Ohio. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm there now.
You're there now. Okay, back in the. Oh,
yeah,
nice. Okay,
waiting out this thing.
So, were you a precocious young magician, or were you into all these other things as a youngster, or was it about being the magician when you were a youngster?
It's a good question. I guess hard to assess yourself. I guess if I'm looking back, I would say, like many of us, I was an all-obsessive young magician. It's all I cared about. I mean, I had other interests, was into sports, was into the Civil War a little bit, history. And I was a good student. I wasn't a brainiac, but I was a good student. But I think it came later, this real curiosity about everything around me. And it's the game changer, right? I mean, I can't emphasize enough. There's a great Michael Close line I'm always quoting in my work. I think he says, like, or maybe it's Darren Brown, to be great at magic, you have to have one foot firmly planted in it and one foot firmly planted in the rest of life. Mm-hmm. And that's so true. And I mean, I take as much inspiration as I can from things outside magic, bring them back in. I become obsessed with whatever my travels bring me to, or whatever my new thing is. If I watch a movie I like, I do deep dives. And I imagine that most of us are all the same way. But those things are really interesting. And having those uses, I got a letter from a prisoner one day, and that led to one of my favorite pieces to perform, balance. And, there it is, yeah. And, that came from a real life sort of fascination with and compassion for incarcerated people. Walking around every day for 10 years and watching these blind people in New York who live in my neighborhood and realizing, like, man, they can't appreciate what I do. They can't watch what it is that I do. That's weird. Well, what if they could? That led to one of my favorite pieces, The Way My Parents Met. That story of chance was the perfect sort of metaphor for one of my probably very favorite trick of taking a red deck and a blue deck, and you shuffle one and I shuffle the other, and every card matches. And it just needed something, so it wasn't just a card trick, and it became this unbelievable story of how I'm sitting here, how I was brought into the world.
How do you feel then? Because you release your magic tricks, and they're very they're about you, and they're very personal. And then you're releasing it with your story.
Yeah.
And then you are potentially seeing magicians not being creative enough, in my opinion, but that's their prerogative because you've released it.
Yeah, and I mean, you're great about that. You've always, when we're chatting, you're always saying, if you're interested in a piece I do, you're saying, here's how I want to make it. You totally reinvent it. You totally make it your own, which is the goal. I don't know, it's a fascinating question, and I wish I had a better answer. I can tell you that, as co-owner of Vanishing Ink, I see the trends of what tricks sell, and my tricks are the opposite of the trends. The tricks that sell are like things you pull a flap down and they just do something, right? That's what's hot now, and that's what we sell bazillions of. You're right. The stuff I sell, they're mostly performance driven, and they're so tailored to me that they would be ridiculous in other people's hands. And yet my tricks sell very well. And maybe it's selfish of me, but I've never had an instance. If we're on a show together and I want to do balance, I'm going to do balance. And if somebody else has got it on the show, they're going to politely bow out because it's my trick. I haven't really encountered. The closest that I encountered a little bit of like regret was Inferno, my trick Inferno, which is a thought of card in Magic, which doesn't have like a ton of my personality in it, but I think it's a great trick, and it's getting a lot of renewed interest because it's so perfect for Zoom and virtual shows. You can put it on a little glass, and now you're go through with people on Zoom and then take it out of the matchbook. I mean, that was a trick that I didn't get to do, still haven't done on TV. It's always been done by other more famous, much more famous magicians. And it is a little bit of a weird feeling to see other magicians doing My Little Baby, but fair's fair, right? They bought it. I put it on the market. I have to be ready for that.
Yeah. Interesting. So you talked about it, you brought it up, Vanishing Ink. One of the biggest magic sellers, virtual magic shops, probably in the world now. I use it all the time. It's a fantastic, this is a fantastically designed operation as well, because it's incredibly user friendly, and it's interesting. It runs the gamut of being great for professionals because it has that knowledge and that backup and the books, and there's always someone to speak to about that stuff. But then you've got the commercial stuff as well, and one of the things that's been coming up, a lot of kids magic, and you've written you've done quite a few kids magic effects and books.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I appreciate you saying that. Again, it's really funny. I mean, I'm often asked to be on business podcasts and do interviews with businesses and talk about our marketing and stuff. And like, I'm the worst for that sort of thing. I don't have a database for my shows. I don't follow up with clients to build my Christmas roster. I mean, I have no shortcuts. I'm a very busy performer if it's not a pandemic, and I'm probably busy despite myself, and my only driving sort of North Star is I feel like if I do a great job, the right clients will come and they'll keep coming back. And for the most part, it works. Do I lose some clients because I'm not, chasing them down? Probably. Similarly, with Vanishing Ink, we're not sitting around in meetings trying to maximize profit or analyzing the data for what kind of tricks magicians are buying. Andy and I truly have the kind of magic shop we'd want to shop at. So our only meetings, we do internal meetings once a week. We talk about new projects and stuff, and it's as easy as going, "Did you see this thing? That video that they sent? It was really cool, right? I mean, I would use that in the show. Okay, cool, let's do it." Or, "Do you see that thing? Yeah, I mean, it looks kind of like it wouldn't last very long, so I don't know, let's pass." And that's as intense and scientific as our meetings get. We're moved to publish the books and tricks of the people we respect and we love. And we're motivated by, trying to be the shop. When we do like returns, no questions asked, or free shipping, it's just because like those are the things we'd want. And the shops that we like to shop at outside of magic do those things, and we go, we should do that.
You've, the myriad of things you do. You do the session every year, which, I think but when is it? July next year now?
It's in July, and Magi Fest is tentatively scheduled for May, but we're actively trying to find perhaps a slightly pushed out date when more people will be immunized.
Right. And these are fabulous. I mean, the session it's an amazing convention, and people don't know. I mean, magicians love a convention. We all go, we all congregate at these things. And there are I would say the two standout conventions in the UK are Blackpool and the Session. And the Session has grown into this thing, but the Session was always this intimate ideal of a magic convention. Yeah,
it's true. And I mean, it brings up as well, the push and pull that I feel and the tension I feel all the time with everything, which is, you're right. When the Session started, Andy ran it for a period of years with a different partner before I joined him. And it was this, highly anticipated, lovely little convention. And they would bring in one or two or possibly three names. Well, we bring in 15 to 20 names now. Some people love the vibe we've created. We have tried to make it the premier series. Because, Blackpool's different. I really look forward to Blackpool. But let's call it what it is. we go to Blackpool because we love being with that many of our friends. We love having hundreds of dealers at our fingertips, and we love big gala shows. I mean, you don't go to Blackpool for expertise and close-up and stuff. That's what you come to the session for. The session has grown, and some people think it's grown too big. But if you don't let it grow that big, you can't have 20 performers, each one debuting new tricks and new lectures and special performances. You're back to 70 or 80 people with one guy.
Yeah. And nothing stays the same. I mean, unfortunately, we're all nostalgic to how things were at one point. The Magic Castle 20 years ago was this, and it's not that anymore. And
right.
What is today is not tomorrow. I mean, it just never is.
But I appreciate it, and I thank you. I mean, I think that our two conventions, Magic Fest, which you haven't been to yet, in Ohio, that's twice the size of the session. And that's a really lovely, big Midwest convention. It probably has the best, I would say, I will go on record and say it has the best jam scene. 4 a.m, you're going to see Williamson next to Carney, next to whoever at a table jamming. I'd put it against any other convention for the jam hang time scene. And the session is, I think, one of the most highbrow. I mean, we really try and keep the level extremely high. So I appreciate it.
So what's inspiring you now? Where are you finding your new inspirations? Are you finding new inspirations?
I am. I mean, like everybody, this is a process. This pandemic is an emotional roller coaster. And lately, it's interesting you asked that question. So the first thing I did was I finished my book for the public, How Magicians Think. And the first part of the pandemic was spent promoting Magic Mail, which is a children's book that came out and made a nice splash and is in the world now and kind of put to bed. I have another children's book that we finished that's coming out through major publishers in the coming months. But I'm coming up on almost a year of no shows. I'm going to do occasional virtual things for clients and stuff, but I don't have a bespoke virtual show like a lot of my colleagues. And I am thinking about it. I'm thinking about what can I do that's true to me and what I care about in the virtual space. And I can tell you I've decided I'm talking about it. I wasn't for the longest time, but I don't even know if you know this, but I developed my own memorized deck 5 years ago now, almost 5 years ago. And it's more than just a stack. It's a whole system. It's basically the only deck I keep in my pocket, and I can do all my repertoire out of this stack. I can do so many things I could never do before. The stack isn't just the order of the cards, it's the cards themselves, and it's the work I've put into it in the box, and it all kind of works together in this whole new, it's like a new operating system. Like this is the operating system I do card magic in. I can do all my acts, a close-up act, a parlor act, everything out of it. And I've written the book on it. I've spent the whole I had actually started it before the pandemic, but in kind of a way to myself, just trying to keep all the notes. And I used Aronson Stack for 20 years first, so I had a lot of Stack-independent material. So I don't know when it's going to come out, but that book's going to come out, and we're going to be doing a big Talk About Tricks bound edition with all the material from the columns through Magic Magazine. They're going to be putting those out, which is kind of fun. I'll be able to revisit 868 tricks that I described from truly all the best magicians in the world.
Yeah, I remember those. To describe it, you did. You had an article every month in, I think it was every month in Magic Magazine.
Every month in Magic Magazine, between 3 and 6 tricks a month, and I did it for 12 years.
And there was, I used one. We talked about it before, 242, I think it was the poker.
242, yeah, and I've got a whole routine. So 242 started as a Richard Vollmer trick. It was just a one-phase 10-card poker deal, but without a Jonah card, which had kind of made it interesting. And then I discovered that you could do the same pattern, if that makes sense, but do a blackjack deal, which is really cool because more people know about blackjack than poker. And then I added an ending, which is a 15-card poker with 3 people, which is pretty cool. So that's 242 2.0, I think we called it. But and then in this new stack called the particle system, in my stack, the 10-card poker deal is built into the middle of the stack. Right. You have 10 cards that you can do with a Jonah card right in the stack.
That's great. I did something with that with Woody a while ago with Woody Aragon using his idea, but then also playing with Stand Up Monty and also playing with a Jonah card version of a poker deal and trying to build that all into the things. And, it was quite complicated. So I think that's a really interesting...
It's great.
Interesting idea.
Great.
So listen, I know you're pushed for time today. We're hitting that mark, and we could talk for quite a long time, I think.
It's been a real pleasure. I so appreciate it. I mean, I do a fair amount of these things in and out of magic, and I so appreciate talking to a like-minded person and somebody who's interested in the same things I am. So thanks, Paul. Grateful for your friendship. Wish you great success. Thanks to everybody listening, and we'll see you around. Thanks a lot, Joshua J. Pleasure. Look, I did the whole name there because it was a kind of like professional way of ending it. So, we'll hopefully we'll do it again. It'd be great.
All right, take care.